I am a birth junkie. I just can't get enough of seeing births or talking about birth. I just love it, and it's such a thrill. But I wasn't always this way. And even though I grew up with a mum who's a midwife and have always had a positive outlook on birth, it wasn't until the birth of my own children that I realized what a profound impact giving birth can have on a woman. I got pregnant with twins, and at 22 weeks, my waters broke on one of my twins. My first birth was quite a traumatic experience and left me suffering from postnatal depression. After that experience, I became a birth advocate for others. And then I came full circle and had an amazing, empowering, and healing experience just 5 months ago for my second birth. When I had that experience when my waters broke at 22 weeks, I'll never forget it. I said to myself, they're too little. It's too early. And the first thing I did was I rang my mum, and she said, get to a hospital. Now, my mum's not someone who panics very easily. When I was 12, I fell off a horse and broke and dislocated my shoulder, and she put me to bed with my arm in a tea towel and 2 Panadol because she knew the doctor wouldn't be in at the hospital for another couple of hours. So when she said get to a hospital, I knew it was serious. So I called my husband, I called an ambulance, and I was taken to hospital. When I got there, the doctors used words like deformity, termination, not viable, because a baby before 24 weeks gestation isn't considered viable. And so if I'd gone into labour and given birth then, they wouldn't have even tried to save them. So I had to make it to 24 weeks. And those were 2 extremely stressful weeks. But I made it to 24 weeks. I made it to 25 weeks. I made it all the way to 32 weeks. 10 weeks bed rest in a Hong Kong public hospital. 4-hourly temperature checks, daily blood tests, extremely limited visiting hours, was not the most pleasant of experiences. And a lot of people have asked me, how did you not go crazy? How did you do it 10 weeks in bed like that? And I said, it's because I had to want to be there. Because every day I stayed in there it increased their chances of survival. And 10 weeks to the day, I went into labour. Ironically, even though they could have come at any moment, I was massively unprepared for giving birth and dealing with premature babies. Fortunately for me, the labour was quite straightforward. 12 hours, a vaginal birth with twins, which is very unusual. But after they were born, they were taken away straight away to the intensive care unit, which was necessary, and my husband went with them to make sure that they were okay. And I was left alone in the birth room for a couple of hours afterwards. And at first, I was like so elated. I'd done it, they were out. I thought they were okay. I wasn't sure because nobody came to tell me. I was left there alone for 3 or 4 hours. And in the end, I ended up flagging down a nurse who was passing in the hallway because I couldn't move because I'd had an epidural. And I said, what about me? Hello. And she said, you need to rest and we've got paperwork to do. Eventually I was taken back to the ward, and about 7 hours later I got to go upstairs and meet my babies. The next day I was discharged and I went home, and then 3 weeks later they were discharged and came home. And even though they were small, they were fine and I was fine. And everyone said to me, you must be so happy you're okay, they're okay, you know, it's great. And it was for a while. And then about 4 months after they were born, the cracks started to show. And one night it all became a bit too much, and I nearly harmed one of my babies. But I have a supportive husband, and I was able to hand him the baby. And the next day, I saw a doctor and was put on medication for postnatal depression. And I stabilized, and everything went along like that. And then about a year later, I went back to work. I'm a massage therapist, and I started massaging again. And then something happened that was a turning point in my life. One of my pregnant clients asked me to massage her in labor. And I didn't know about this, so I went home and I Googled massage in labor. It's amazing. And up popped the word doula. A doula is a non-medical support person, someone who supports couples, particularly a woman, emotionally and physically in labor. And I thought this was quite interesting. And so I mentioned it to my mum, and then she said, oh, well, you should look into teaching calm birth. And calm birth is an antenatal program that is designed to help couples prepare themselves for a joyful, positive birth experience. And the two seem to fit nicely together. And as part of my training to become a doula, I had to write a reflective essay on that previous birth experience. And I actually found this to be an extremely difficult thing to do because I had to go back and I had to relive and delve into those emotions that I'd kept inside that I'd never really dealt with. But it was actually an amazingly healing process because it made me look into what it was that was so traumatic about that experience for me. And I came to the conclusion that it wasn't really the 10 weeks on bed rest. It wasn't so much the fact that I'd had a premature birth, because those were things that were out of my control. They were necessary for the baby's survival. It was the little things, like being left alone in that birthing room by myself, not knowing if my babies were alive or dead. It was not being able to hold them for a week afterwards, even though the hospital saw fit to bath them and do other things with them. And so learning that, how something as simple as that could have affected me so much, really helped me in my job then. And I became so passionate about helping other couples and women avoid the same sort of experience. Just so unnecessary, these things that can affect a woman. And then when I was ready emotionally to get pregnant again, took another 2 years of trying, 4 rounds of IVF, but we got pregnant. And I was determined this time that I was going to have a different experience. I had 2 priorities. I was going to have who I wanted with me in the birthing room, because my mum hadn't been allowed to be with me the last time. And no one was going to take my baby away from me afterwards unless it was absolutely necessary. So I decided on a home birth. The first reaction I got from people when I said I'm going to have a home birth is, isn't that illegal? Or isn't that dangerous? Now, it's not illegal in Hong Kong. A planned home birth is actually as safe as a hospital birth in a low-risk woman. But what I had to do was I had to convince a few people. So I had to convince my husband that it was a safe option. I even had to convince my mum, whose idea it was in the first place. And I also had to convince myself. Because when you are faced with that much negativity around something that you're planning to do, it's very hard to stay positive in the face of that. And so I kept working on it, and I'm so glad I did, because 5 months ago, I gave birth at home to a beautiful little girl. And it really was one of the most unforgettable experiences. Not the easiest of labours, but I would do it again and again if I could. The difference between the two is so subtle that I can't explain it, and also so vast that I can't explain it. And if I hadn't had that traumatic first experience, I certainly wouldn't be as passionate about doing what I'm doing now. And I'm sure that I wouldn't have looked for that amazing second experience. I wouldn't have tried my hardest to create something so amazing. Giving birth is a life-changing event. How we start our relationships with our babies can have long-lasting effects. And the emotional aspect of birth should not be overlooked. It's so important. And if I had one wish, it would be that all women could have the chance to experience the type of birth I did second time round. A birth where she feels safe, supported, empowered, but above all, respected. Thank you.